Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Two Nates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and joining me in place of Nathan Kwan, who's right now in San Francisco, replacing him for today will be Evan Tenenbaum, our resident MLB expert. Let's start off with some Rangers talk. Evan, take it away.
Yeah, so this is a interesting team that maybe 2 weeks ago felt dead in the water. Trade away Yu Darvish, see if he can reload for next year, and all of a sudden they're back in the wild card race. Funny how things kind of turn out. They go ahead and take the series against Houston last weekend, and then go ahead and sweep a really fading Detroit Tigers team. They're currently 1-1 with Chicago right now. I've noticed, even in the losses that they've had in the last week or two, they've been pretty close. The last 4 that they've had were one-run losses. They've been in every single game. So you're looking at, I guess, this team that's probably at the peak that it's been all season in terms of performance. You can dive right into specific statistics. This offense is completely on fire right now. They've been scoring at least 8 runs for a majority of the games. They scored 12 and 14 against Detroit. Like, this offense has just been kind of going insane this past week. You can really tack it on some of these guys that have obvious issues with their game. You're looking at Joey Gallo, who for a brief time, sometime during this week, had an OPS over 900. Obviously, it's dipped back down now. He's batting at he has a 2.8 batting average right now. Like, he's probably going to be setting the record for lowest batting average for someone with the 900 or more OPS in Rangers history. The last guy to do that was Mickey Tettleton in 1995. Who's Mickey Tettleton? No one knows. The point being is Joey Gallo is probably going to make a name for himself more than one of these guys. And it starts with being able to connect for power, and being able to slowly but surely bring in that average up. Other guys that have been pretty interesting, Mike Napoli also has had 3 home runs this week. He's not hitting just as well as Gallo is, but he's still contributing, and this is kind of what you wanted to see out of Mike Napoli. Adrian Beltre continues to be the ageless wonder. He has 2 home runs this week. A little less contribution on offense than some of the other guys, but he's still contributing with his glove. Delino DeShields has taken to the leadoff role, mostly because Carlos Gomez has been hurt and he's been filling in for him defensively, but he's really doing well in the leadoff role. Has 8 hits this week, 5 walks, really jump-starting this offense and making sure that they're runners on base for some of these other guys to drive in. And the one big guy who's really had the best week is Nomar Mazara. Last week, when you called him just a so-so player, and he is what he is, he's gone off the rails in the last week. In the month of August, he's hitting .351, .422, .509 with 18 RBIs. Is pretty damn good for Nomar Mazara. Of those 18 RBIs, 10 of which are in the last 5 days. He's kind of gone off the rails at the end of the Detroit series and even into the Chicago series. He's really coming out to be the player that we want him to be. And his average and all of his numbers are really stabilizing at this point, where they've been kind of low for a majority of the season. Got really hot in April and had about 2.5 months where he wasn't doing much on offense. And it's good to see Nomar Mazara kind of contributing again. As far as the rest of the team, starting pitching has been pretty improved post All-Star break weeks. ABD and Nick Martinez have not really had opportunities to start. And Tyson Ross has come back off the DL to take their place. He hasn't been great. He still has control issues, but you can tell when he has his control, he has good stuff. And a lot of people are kind of jumping off shit for him. I still think he has some good stuff in there. It'll need some monitoring, and you may need to skip a starter every now and then, but I still pseudo believe in Tyson Ross. Everyone else is doing fantastic. Martin Perez has put up 2 straight quality starts after being awful after the All-Star break. There was this article about him recognizing that he may have been tipping his pitches, kind of like how Yu Darvish was earlier, and he made the adjustments for that game where he pitched 8 innings and only gave up 1 earned run. And he's seeing some improvement in his game where his hand's set before a pitch, whether it's on his chest or if it's a little bit more out. If he's made those adjustments and all of a sudden he's pitching really well, like we're looking at Martin Perez and how he was supposed to be when we initially came up. your top guys are continuing to do well. Andrew Kashner had 6 straight quality starts. Last night he couldn't fish 6 innings, so that ended. Still necessarily he is playing pretty well. Cole Hamels is sort of back to his usual tricks. And you know what? The rest of the guys are just doing all right. You never know what you're going to get with AJ Griffin, but it isn't as awful as it was earlier in the season. So the starting rotation looks all right. And even the bullpen, which has been this team's downfall this entire year, has just been pretty good so far. I think I've seen them relying a little bit less on their top relievers. Keone Kela has been hurt. Jose Leclerc has had obviously some walk issues this year, so they're not using him as in high leverage situations anymore. Alex Claudio, I think they're recognizing they may have been using him too much, and they're trying to wean off him. They got some back end guys that are pretty interesting. Ricky Rodriguez just came up. He's a young guy, and I don't really know if he would be considered a prospect, but he's done an all right job so far. Tony Barnett's vastly improved. Jason Grilli's doing an okay job. I really like his veteran presence so far. I haven't had much to complain about Jason Grilli. I didn't really expect him to be good at all, but it seems from top to bottom that this bullpen looks better, and it really bodes well for this team that has made its way kind of back to 500. Obviously, they lost last night, but they're really in the thick of the wild card race at this point. What have you seen about this team? What do you think the biggest deal about this team has been that allowed them to come back to 500 and really be competitive?
Well, it's sort of the reason why they've always been sort of like sticking around 500, which has been the offense and how it can sometimes be a little bit streaky. I mean, I know we sort of talk about this a lot, but it's just like you have people like Nomar Mazara, Rigo Odor, who like just sort of like go back and forth between very hot streaks and very cold streaks, and that really is a big reason why, to me, that this offense can go from just being like one of the hottest in the league to just cooling off a bit. But now that being said, thing that's really come through is just like how well this like starting rotation has been able to hold up in spite of the fact that they lost their best pitcher on. Andrew, like you said, Andrew Kashner, he's been holding up real well this year and has actually been a pretty decent number 2 pitcher. Cole Hamels has been real nice as well. And then Martin Perez definitely, like you said, has seemed to really improve this year, at least with his last few starts. And it might very well possibly be due to the fact that he was unintentionally tipping his pitches. Like, I mean, I can't imagine him intentionally wanting to do that, but, sometimes there are things about your mechanics that you're unaware of that end up being more of a detriment to your performance than necessarily helpful. So yeah, I think that all those things are coming together, and then obviously, not to get too generic here, but I mean like the bullpen hasn't been near as bad as it was at the start of this year. I know Kwan likes to keep joking about it, but I mean, you have to look at like the Astros bullpen and the Rangers bullpen, and I would say the Rangers bullpen has done at least a decent job recently of holding up in comparison to the Astros bullpen. It's neither here nor there,
Yeah, I really see those bullpens being pretty similar at this point. Obviously, at the beginning of the season, we both praised each other's bullpens, thinking that, our low-cost guys were really going to continue to do well. And I don't know if that really changes my mindset of overpaying for good relievers, but it just goes to show you how, again, we keep hammering this home. Bullpens are transient. Sometimes you'll never know what kind of value you're going to get out of them. But at least for the Rangers, they're holding up well enough that they can continue to stay competitive in this wild card race, which is kind of going nuts at this point. They passed Baltimore and Tampa Bay in the standings. And right now they're only half a game behind Minnesota and Kansas City, 1 game behind the Angels. So they're kind of in the neck of things. They have 17 games left against LA and Seattle, who are ahead of them in the standings right now. Like this is going to go down to the wire at this point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I agree. Like this is, it's kind of just weird. Like this team seems to be playing with even more fire now that they sold off so many players at the deadline. I don't want to like imply that like people that were traded away were somehow like holding them back, but
there's a kernel of truth to that. Jeremy Jeffress was probably your most inconsistent reliever on that bullpen. He probably wasn't the worst, but he was definitely the most inconsistent. And Lucroy, for some reason, has had some defensive issues this year, which may or may not carry over to Colorado. But the point is that Red Nicholas and Robinson Chirinos have done an okay job holding the fort. So essentially, the Rangers improved via subtraction.
Yeah, which is kind of scary when you consider like how much we gave up to get Jeffress and Lucroy to begin with, but that's neither here nor there, you know?
Well, I mean, you can't really measure that until everyone in that trade really gets to the majors. Lewis Brinson's actually hurt, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season, so at least we don't have to worry about that. I mean, hope he gets better, but still.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this team looks a lot better, and I expect them to be competitive for the rest of the season. For coming up, they finish up this Chicago White Sox series, and then they go on this long road trip against the Angels in Oakland, and then eventually Houston.
It's an interesting time to be a Rangers fan. But let's move on to the Houston Astros. So the Astros, obviously, they played against the Rangers this week, and they avoided the sweep with a decent outing from Dallas Keuchel. Fortunately, that was following two very poor outings, one from Charlie Morton and the other from Mike Fiers. They ended up then splitting a 4-game series against the D-backs. The offense was very inconsistent without Correa. And they were shut out twice during that series. And even in the games that they did win, their bullpen struggled at the end there. Now, to be said, the bullpen problems may have been a bit exaggerated this month at least. They have a 1.92 ERA for the month of August so far. I mean, the only big detractors from that have been Liriano and Gregerson, who have had the most earned runs given up among bullpen pitchers. They were able to acquire Tyler Clippard from the White Sox, and he's done a decent job so far. Really only pitched 1 2/3 innings scoreless with 3 strikeouts and no runs. Joe Musgrove has been good coming out of the bullpen, 1 earned run in 13 and 1/3 innings since going to the bullpen, helping really to stabilize that group. Giles has been more dependable of late with his 6-out save on Sunday and then a 5-out save last night. And then they might possibly be getting Will Harris off the DL soon. Now to go on to Dallas Keuchel. Dallas Keuchel seems to have refound his form, and he's now for at least the past week, he's won 2 games, lost 0. He's only given up 1 earned run in 13 2/3 innings this week. And Altuve has been arguably the MVP of the league. I mean, it's going to come down, I think, between him and Aaron Judge. But I mean, Altuve has a very strong case. He has the highest average in the AL with a .362 average, with 19 home runs, 67 RBI, 27 stolen base, and a .992 OPS, carrying this offense time and time again with all the injuries that have happened to Springer, Correa, and obviously it helped to help compensate the injuries that were happening to the starting pitching, you know.
Yeah, I mean, as far as MVP goes, there are obviously still some holes seen in Aaron Judge's game, specifically all of his consecutive games with strikeouts. Altuve looks the most solid player out of anybody I've seen in the AL so far. And you did bring home about him carrying this team with all these injuries. Obviously, the team as a whole kind of had issues ever since Correa went on the DL. But Altuve himself has continued to rake, and I think he has really good credentials, both offensively and defensively, to be the MVP this year. Suffice to say that this team has looked pretty average this last week. And you brought home what we were saying before, that even though the bullpen's been pretty good this month, you're looking at specific guys that you need to rely on at some point. Francisco Liriano, you got at the trade deadline, and he's been not that good in this past week. Gregerson, I don't even know if you can trust him anymore. Hopefully you can replace him with some of the other guys. Joe Musgrove, who was a rotation player, and kind of got moved to the bullpen, and he looks like he's doing a good job for now, but again, you never know. My biggest worry about the Astros is that rotation. Obviously, Dallas Keuchel is kind of back to his former self after getting hurt for so long, but I have just question marks about everybody else in that rotation. Charlie Morton has been good and bad at points. You may or may not trust him. Again, in one of the games against the Rangers, he had a really poor chance at fielding on a specific play and eventually led to 2 runs, and it kind of spiraled his outing. Had he been able to make that play, he probably could have had maybe a quality start. But Charlie Morton's playing like a real back end of the rotation kind of guy. Your other guys in the middle there, Colin McHugh, kind of been back and forth ever since he's come off the DL. I don't know how much you can actually rely on him playoffs-wise, and I think that's my biggest issue with this Houston Astros team is they're not built for the playoffs right now. You got Dallas Keuchel, who you're going to throw out twice in a series, but it's really like picking your poison for the rest of the starting members that you want to put in there. And the reason I say that is, yeah, maybe they'll go ahead and throw a reliable game, but playoff baseball is just a different game. You need to rely on your starters a little bit more because they're not going to be able to go out as much. The managers are going to be quicker to pull the trigger if they're running into issues in the 4th, 5th, 6th inning. They might, run out and pull their starter from the game so they can go to their bullpen. If the game is close, there's less of a margin of error, I guess is what I would say. So you need your rotation members to be able to face adversity and get through those middle innings. The middle innings are the toughest in playoffs. Because if they can, then you put less pressure on their bullpen, and guys like Liriano can maybe shine a little bit more. Tyler Clippard has looked good so far. He'll get him to shine. Ken Giles, who had issues earlier in the season but may be coming down from that, he'll be good. Chris Davinsky, who used to rely on so much and has not been good so far in the last month or so, maybe he can shine. And maybe he'll be the guy is if these starting guys run into issues, you can go to a long man. But again, you don't want to wear him down either. So that's what my biggest issue is with this team is after Keuchel, like who do you got that you can confidently put in a playoff series?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, at the end of the day, for me at least, like even if the Astros do lose their number 1 overall seed, they're still in very good position for the playoffs. I mean, I know like Kwan was freaking out last week, and to some extent it's understandable. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like this team knows its strengths. The important people are getting back into form. Now that being said, like obviously, like if they can get someone else at the waiver trade deadline that could help with the rotation, that would be very swell. Considering that Lance McCullers might not be super effective when he comes back. But that also being said, I mean, this is still a very strong team, and nothing's really going to take that away from it,
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think that they're going to have issues going down the stretch. Like I said, I just worry that is Keuchel going to be the enough in the playoffs? And that's not to say that, Brad Peacock or Charlie Morton or any of the other rotation members aren't good. It's just sometimes that's not enough playoff good. Like you saw last year with our previous years, you get behind Cole Hamels and Yu Darvish, like everyone else on that Rangers rotation was not good in the playoffs. And sometimes it's that having that number 3 have a strong start that makes the difference. At least for Houston, depending on if they play average enough for Boston to kind of catch up with them. Right now they're 4.5 games in front of Boston, but over the course of a month and a half, that could change. And even to close the season, they play 4 games against Boston. So if they're within 2 or 3 games, that'll be an interesting series to really decide who would get home field advantage in the playoffs, and that could make a difference for this team. And like we were saying before about the rotation, who do you want to add at the waiver trade deadline? Obviously, the substantiated rumors would be Justin Verlander, how he was connected. As a note from Kwan, he's in the camp that thinks it's not going to happen, and he has obvious good reasons about it. Verlander has an albatross contract. He's owed $56 million over the next 2 years. Houston would be very hesitant to pick up that money. Jeff Luhnow is not going to be that kind of guy who wants to take that. So I just don't know. Verlander he's having a solid year, and I think he would be one of those guys that you can put out in Game 3 and feel confident about. There's a large portion of the Houston fan base that thinks so too. Sometimes I'm in the opinion that sometimes you kind of have to bite the bullet. Not every prospect's going to pan out. Houston got lucky with having Bregman and Gurriel and Correa and Springer pretty much at the same time breaking out. Your next wave of prospects may not do that. Sometimes you have to take measured gambles, and
For sure, yeah. No, I honestly, I kind of agree with you too. Now, I mean, that also being said, is just like, I think the bigger thing that they're more scared of is like if they take on Verlander's contract, which you alluded to. If they take that on, will they have enough to sign all of the rest of their core? But I mean, like, I'm not familiar enough with the contract situation with the Houston Astros to really make a definitive comment on that. But that's probably what's at play with a lot of people that are hesitant to go pull that. I don't know if it's likely that this happens. That they're able to.
If it would happen, Detroit would have to eat some money. But then again, Houston might have to give up more prospects. So it's a pick and choose kind of thing.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, just like with Prince Fielder trade, we were able to get Detroit to eat more money. But that also being said, I mean, part of that was because we were giving up Ian Kinsler. I mean, you usually don't see someone of that caliber getting traded at the waiver deadline. Like that's usually a little bit harder to see coming. But I mean, if it does, then that's like probably the biggest name I've ever seen traded before the waiver trade deadline and after the what most people would consider the trade deadline. So we'll see. So I mean, it'll be very interesting. And like you said, like it's like Verlander. I mean, not only is he someone that had a solid year, but like last year, arguably he should have won the Cy Young. I mean, in spite of everything that Verlander's wife said, like she, for all intents and purposes, she had a right to be mad about it. He arguably was the best pitcher last year. So
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Like I said, Houston's very scared of that contract, and like you said, they want to invest more in their core. They have a couple of guys that they're coming up for extension in a few years, and you're not going to be able to do that if you have if you've spent $56 million on Verlander and can't sign other fill-in guys for the next 2 years because you're committing all that money to Verlander. So it'll be interesting to see next week and a half if they bite the bullet with Verlander. And if they don't bite the bullet with Verlander, can this rotation pick themselves up and look solid enough that they can probably compete in an actual division series?
All right. So for the upcoming schedule for the Astros, they finish up against Oakland, and then they host the Washington Nationals, and then they're on the road against Los Angeles Angels. And so it'll be interesting to see how the Astros play for the next week. So let's move on to the NFL, and we'll start off with the Cowboys. They just finished training camp in Oxnard and have moved over to the Star in Frisco for the rest of camp. So if you're in the area, you get a chance to go see training camp for the first time in a while. But yeah, but this past week for the preseason, the Cowboys played against the Rams. They ended up losing that game. But was there anything that stuck out to you for that game, Evan?
No, not really. Preseason games are always just kind of a collective, let's just do our reps and get out of there kind of thing, and also wait for the NFL to make money on games that don't mean anything. I usually don't see things that you want to look for until all your starters really get a couple reps in an actual preseason game, which will happen in this Colts game coming up. Dak Prescott will get a couple series with the offense, and then he'll get benched. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. Reports out of camp have looked like he's really been solid in improving himself. There was a practice the other day. He was perfect 18 for 18. So I'm excited to see how that can translate to a quote-unquote simulated game against some real competition, at least for a few series. Other issues that I've seen in this Cowboys camp so far, other than the obvious Zeke stuff, is just how they've been able to really fill in for those injury-ridden spots. Obviously, left guard is going to be an issue. This offensive line has been pretty beastly for the last 3 or 4 seasons, but you have an obvious issue there. And specifically, if you're not having Zeke for any amount of games this year, then you're going to need a running back that can make his own plays happen, specifically on the left side. And then the rest of the offensive line really needs to step up their game. And then obvious issues on the defense, more injuries, more young guys that are going to be filling in spots on the corner and on the D-line that really need to make a name for themselves. And this defense has to vastly improve if they want to get anywhere this season.
For sure. And I mean, I will say this, like Taco Charlton did stand out a bit from this past preseason game against the Rams. He actually almost had a safety at one point, get out his sack in the end zone and almost got the safety that way. But at the end of the day, as you said, like they're depending on a lot of factors that could really blow up in their face. And so it's really going to be interesting to see how this team operates, especially without Zeke for the first half of the year. Now, granted, he is trying to appeal his cause, and there've been a lot of rumors and a lot of stories going on about the veracity of the claims and against him. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's necessarily something we need to comment on.
For sure.
I do think the NFL kind of jumped the gun on handing down the suspension. Specifically, if you didn't have any charges laid against him, then why do they need to step up and go ahead and hit the hammer down? But we don't need to delve right into that. I think the more important thing there is if Zeke's going to miss a definite amount of time, how are the other running backs going to handle that? And obviously, Alfred Morris's job may have just been saved because of Zeke's suspension. So it'll be crucial for Alfred Morris to prove himself, make sure he would stay on the roster even when Zeke comes back. He's the biggest insurance policy that the Cowboys have this year.
For sure, definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good thing that they invested on two running backs with a lot of experience. So let's touch on the Texans then. Right now, the QB battle between Savage and Watson is heating up. To me, it looks like Watson might be the starter right out the gate. But I mean, do you have anything to add on this?
Y'all hammered it pretty close last week when you were talking at the first preseason game. How Deshaun Watson is playing really solid right now, but he is the one that is pacing Tom Savage right now. Tom Savage has definitely stepped up his game. You see both of them having a really solid camp this year. And the way Kwan explained it, that Tom Savage hasn't done anything negative to affect his job right now. I do think Tom Savage is going to end up being the starting quarterback week one. Whether that holds is left to be desired. You'll have to see. They kind of have an easier, division this year. Maybe they'll give Tom Savage a little bit bigger margin of error. At least until maybe week 4, week 5, week 6, if he's playing bad enough, and maybe then they switch to Watson. I don't think Watson can be good enough where, unless there was an injury to Savage, that he'd be starting over him. And I see a lot of Dak Prescott in Deshaun Watson. His poise, his grace, his able to, in an emergency, come in and play okay. But I just don't see the negative out of Tom Savage yet. That would force me to play my hand and start Watson first.
For sure, yeah. No, that I agree with.
Now, that is to say, at least for these preseason games, it's also kind of hard to manage how good a quarterback can be when 3 of his wide receivers are out. DeAndre Hopkins has a hand issue. He hasn't practiced in an entire week. He should be good to go for the season. And they're just being extra cautious for him. But having him, and then you have Will Fuller, who has his broken collarbone, will be out for a few weeks and even into the season. And Braxton Miller, who has a sprained ankle. There goes your 3 top wide receivers. When are you going to get reps with your main guys? Right now you're playing with guys who are even struggling to make the team itself. Or it's special teams as your main wide receivers right now. So you're going to have to, as a quarterback, you're going to have to make that adjustment to whether that's, your receivers are going to run better routes for you, or they're going to have better hands to catch balls. But you need to be aware that things are going to change once you have Hopkins and Miller come back.
So if y'all are interested, you can look out for the New England game tonight versus Houston Texans. Again, it's preseason, but I mean, like, if you're interested in seeing it, and if you're interested in seeing how the quarterback situation plays out this game, I definitely suggest checking it out.
New England's a top-notch team. that Houston definitely wants to gauge how they play against. This quarterback battle is something that's super interesting this preseason. You want to see how they play against one of the top teams in the AFC.
For sure, definitely. Let's move on now to the NBA. They just released schedules with the Rockets opening the season against the Warriors, and then they're going to be playing the Thunder on Christmas night, and then the Clippers on December 22nd, as well as on January 15th. The Mavs, on the other hand, will be opening up at home against the Atlanta Hawks, which are a team that is tanking at this point. Then they'll be hosting the Golden State Warriors on October 23rd. And then they'll be at Houston on the 21st, so that'll be an interesting game. And then all 4 games against the Spurs will be before the end of December, which is a huge change of pace, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. Schedules are kind of weird. It allows, casual viewers to see what are the big profile games coming up. Obviously, Rockets and Warriors is the marquee matchup on opening night. Is going to be really interesting. The 2 top teams in the West. Obviously, any time that the Rockets are going to be playing the Mavs, or the Spurs are going to be playing the Mavs, or the Rockets are going to be playing the Spurs, any of those combinations are going to be interesting. I'm also interested in seeing with Chris Paul now on the Rockets, the kind of welcome that he'll get on January 15th when they play in LA. So that'll be kind of fun. And at least with the Mavs, they're front ending all their Spurs games, and on the opposite side, they're back ending all their Rockets games. Whereas last year they played the Rockets pretty frequently at the beginning of the year. So it'll be neat to see how this Mavs team, depending on how they really form, can handle kind of a weird schedule.
And now, in interesting Mavs news, they ended up signing center Jeff Withey to a 1-year deal. Now, obviously, this isn't the biggest news in the world, but it might be an interesting insurance policy regarding the whole Nerlens Noel situation. Now, that being said, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the Mavs have shown every indication that they will be re-signing Noel no matter what. But that being said, like this situation has been taking a very long time, and it's we're still waiting on any sort of progress to be heard. And last we checked, like there really hasn't been much movement since pretty much the start of free agency.
Yeah, and I don't understand that. I just don't understand that. If the Mavs have made indication that they'll match any offer that any other team will give him, why don't they just go ahead and sign him? If it feels like no other team is budging, then okay, go ahead and collect your losses and go ahead and sign him. Just go ahead and get it done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, again, it just kind of goes back to like, the Mavs still want to save some money when it comes to cap going in the future, and then Noel, I'm pretty sure, wants to at least make sure he gets as much money as possible going forward. And it's just like I think that it's just like right now they're in sort of a game of chicken. And I mean, well, obviously we'll see. I mean, I'm sure something will get done before training camp. And I'm sure they're like Noel's camp is willing to wait until then. But at a certain point, you just have to kind of bite the bullet and say, like, how much is it worth just to make sure that like Noel is accounted for and is signed on long term and is happy with staying with the Mavs. And I mean, obviously, like what's probably going to come down to is just like how much are the Mavs willing to pay in order to just get a deal done that's long term. That's going to be the big interesting thing going forward, and we'll see. It's also going to probably come down to like at what point does Nerlens Noel just want to just like take the money and just make sure that he himself is accounted for. So that's going to be interesting. And I guess with in terms of NBA rumors and the NBA rumor mill, which has been so busy this year and has been so crazy this year, it's sounding more and more likely that LeBron ends up leaving the Cavs. Now, I keep forgetting the name of this person who really gave this indication this week, but this person was also the same one that said that LeBron planned on returning to the Cavaliers like a year before he ended up doing that. And so more than likely, like this is for all intents and purposes, it looks like LeBron if he doesn't leave before the start of this year or during this year, will be gone by after the end of next year's season. And so a lot of this is being sort of pinned on sort of his relationship with Dan Gilbert. And a lot of it has to probably do with just like how LeBron has just become so sick of Dan Gilbert and how Dan Gilbert like tries to meddle in the team's affairs. And I think part of it also might just be that Dan Gilbert may have very different political views from LeBron. And as LeBron has been like really becoming more vocal in that arena, I think he's becoming less and less enthralled with having to basically play for someone that he might genuinely disagree with. And again, like, I mean, this is LeBron. He's arguably the greatest player in the world right now. So he's someone that can choose for whoever he plays for, you know?
It's weird. It's weird that I guess that someone of LeBron's, fame, I mean, he has so much leverage in this conversation, and it's also amazing how much leverage one player can have in the team's future at this point. Obviously there's been the Kyrie Irving issues going on. I personally think everyone in that team is jaded in thinking 3 NBA finals is not good enough just because they only won one of them. That's my own personal belief, but if LeBron's having issues with both people on his team and management, that's an actual legitimate issue that could tank your team. And it's just so funny how how Cleveland turned into a dumpster fire after he initially left to go to Miami. Then they stocked up on draft picks and they all turned out well and lured LeBron back, and somehow you win one championship, and that's not good enough at this point.
From all indications that I have from Cleveland fans, they are very appreciative for the work that LeBron has done on the court and obviously off court. But I mean, like they absolutely are thrilled with the fact that they were able to win just at least one championship. I mean, it's just unfortunately it came at the same time that the Golden State Warriors ended up building a dynasty. And a lot of it, the reason that the Golden State Warriors are so stacked is because of their response to like how like LeBron has basically been like dominating the league. And so it's interesting to sort of like see that. I mean,
but like the point I was making is, one of the points I was making was that like one player, LeBron James, can swing a team so much that if he leaves, and this team goes from number 1 in the East to middle of the pack, the East, maybe even out of the playoffs. That's a separate point, saying that the Eastern Conference is weak anyway. But the point is, like, it's just amazing how one player can swing a team so much in a sport like basketball.
Oh, absolutely. No, I get that. And I agree with that. It's definitely very interesting. Let's move on to golf. And you're also our resident golf expert, so I'll stay out the way.
Thanks. So all the 4 majors are done this year. You had Sergio win the Masters, Brooks Koepka win the U.S. Open, Jordan Spieth with the British Open. And last week, Justin Thomas ended up winning the PGA Championship. He wasn't leading at any point. That was mostly Matsuyama and Kevin Kisner. But Justin Thomas had very solid last 3 days to kind of do a come from the behind win. He won by 2 strokes ahead of Kisner at -8. And this is Justin Thomas' first major, but this is his 4th tourney win this season. So you're looking at a guy who was kind of under the radar this entire season. Now has 4 wins. So again, one congratulations to him for winning the PGA Championship. If you're curious, George Spieth ended up at +2 for that tournament, tied for 28th. But that leads into I guess the final events for the PGA season, which would be the FedEx Cup. Essentially what happens is the top 125 golfers via points. There's like a point system for the season. So the top 125 get invited to the playoffs, and each successive tournament, more and more get eliminated based on the number of points you can accrue. So your points don't reset as the tournaments keep going. So if you're kind of on the edge In the first tournament, it may not make much of a difference, but if you're at the other cutoff point, you want to do a little bit better in those tournaments. So the first three are the Northern Trust, Dell Technologies, and BMW Championship. And again, more and more golfers get eliminated. The final event, where only the top 30 play, is the Tour Championship. Points are reset, so you can legitimately anyone in the top 30 could end up winning the cup. But you have obviously a better shot if you've been leading the points, the leaderboard in the season so far. So, the next couple of weeks will kind of be interesting. And what I specifically like about the cup is you have, you're the best golfers playing every single week in order to accrue points. So you're going to see the best names in golf at all these, kind of mid-level tournaments. But they're all playing, at their peaks and trying to compete to get the FedEx Cup. This year, Rory McIlroy is defending his title. He's probably not going to get it, considering he has this rib injury that he's kind of battling through this entire month. This week he was saying he wasn't sure if he was even going to try and defend his title and play in the Cup. But he is going to at this point. He's probably not going to end up getting to the final tournament. Just based on his ranking right now. Speaking of rankings, it's interesting. Right now, leading is Hideki Matsuyama, who didn't win a major, but he has had a really solid season this year. 3 wins, 7 top 10s. He's made a lot of cuts in comparison to the number of events he's made. He's only missed 2 of them. So he right now, I think he's the dark horse to end up winning the FedEx Cup, even though he's leading. He hasn't had any high profile wins. He's had a few, but he's just been solid in every single tournament he's played in so far. Finished in the top 10 in both the US Open and the PGA Championship. So he's going to be in the hunt. Other big names, Justin Thomas, who just won the PGA Championship, is in second. Jordan Spieth's in third. Ricky Fowler's 5th, Brooks Koepka's 7th, and Sergio's 21st. A lot of other big profile names are way down the leaderboard and probably have less of a shot, but those are the guys I'm going to be looking at in the next 4 weeks to see if they can climb up to the top and maybe unseat Matsuyama, who didn't win a major this year again, but I think has a legit shot at winning the FedEx Cup this year.
Yo, that's totally dope.
Yeah, golf is dope, man.
Yeah. So let's move on to shoutouts. So the Dynamo have beaten the San Jose Earthquakes 3-0. They're now tied for first in the West with Seattle and Kansas City. They got a goal and an assist from Vicente Sanchez, and first minutes from DP Tomas Martinez. Next is they'll be playing at Vancouver. Dallas, on the other hand, unfortunately, they seem to be continuing to struggle. They got a scoreless draw at home against the worst team in the league in Colorado. Now, granted, they ended up getting a goal rescinded, despite the fact that it probably should have been kept, but we'll see. They're right now 4th in the West, but right now the top of the Western standings are so close that it's not out of the question for them to get back into the thick of it. It's just right now they really have to refocus. Their next game is going to be at Kansas City, though, which, as I said before, they're tied for first in the West, and so it's not going to be any easy picnic. And honestly, they really need to get back on track against a team like Colorado, but they unfortunately were unable to do that.
For me, shout out to Peyton Manning, who visited UT's campus. And then he visited UT's campus. You see what I did there? Tennessee, Texas. Yeah, good. Anyway, he visited the Texas campus earlier this week. Wanted to visit the players and Tom Herman. And 2, he's discussing the Riddle Insight helmet monitoring system. Really a concussion monitoring protocol that they're trying to implement. And obviously Texas has the big bucks to go ahead and do a trial run of that with its players. And specifically ironic, considering there's been a lot of, in camp so far, there's been a lot of players undergoing some concussion protocols, Chris Warren being the most high profile. So, with camp winding down the next couple weeks, and I guess they play Maryland in 2 weeks, it'll be interesting to see how these kinds of protocols will affect how they'll play on the field. So shout out to Peyton Manning for that.
For sure, definitely. Shout out to Texas basketball for playing exhibition games against Australian Basketball League teams this week. Mo Bamba is showing his versatility with his long-range jumpers, his three-pointers, as well as just his absurd wingspan and being able to guard down in the post against pretty much anyone. Also hearing the highlights on Australian accents is hilarious.
Yeah, there's a tweet sent out that's kind of Mo Bamba highlights, and just hearing an Australian guy go "Mo Bamba" with a wingspan of 8'4", like I can't do accents, but yeah, it's just really funny hearing how well these guys are competing up with Australian basketball, which isn't major level. It's probably at a collegiate level. So it's cool seeing Mo Bamba already taking advantage and again building draft stock. We're talking about a guy who hasn't even played with the team yet.
Yeah, for sure.
Shout out to the Florida Marlins, who are no longer under the thumb of Jeffrey Loria, as Derek Jeter and Bruce Sherman, amongst other people, have finally bought them. Derek Jeter is trying to remove that center field sculpture in Marlins Park. We don't know if that'll happen yet, but that's obviously a step in the right direction, trying to kind of reroute and make sure that Marlins are a little bit more about baseball and less about the fun experience. So shout out to Derek Jeter for freeing all the Marlins fans.
I mean, yeah, ding dong, the Wicked Witch is dead, so. Shout out to Ian Kinsler for calling out Angel Hernandez for after being thrown out of the game on Monday. Angel Hernandez is just not he's not really up there with like any of the more with the better umps out there.
We run into that issue where if you know the ump's name, then he's probably not doing his job right. Specifically, Ian was having issues with him all that game, and he probably made some sarcastic remark to him, and called. It was obvious that ball was a ball, but Ian made this comment about, "Are you sure that's not a strike?" Like kind of sarcastically, and Angel kind of blew his gasket. We've talked about before about how umpires are people too, but again, this is an umpire. You're supposed to be doing your job and probably be a little bit more consistent, and don't let sarcastic remarks from one batter kind of throw you off. And again, it brings to the issue of why umpire unions are so strong that they continue to allow inconsistent play from these guys. And they allowed to keep their jobs. I mean, not like baseball players can play crappy for a while and get to keep their jobs. So just kind of goes to show you that.
For sure.
I want to personally shout out the 10-year anniversary of one of the best games in Major League history. When the Texas Rangers beat the Baltimore Orioles 30-3. That's coming up on Tuesday. The anniversary of that modern day MLB record for runs scored in a game. That was in a season that the Rangers were just completely lost in. The other big highlight in that season was this 30-3 game. So shout out to that.
For sure. So shout out to Kwan for being at AT&T Park this Friday night. His report is that vintage match Matt Moore was there. Unfortunately, it was also against the Phillies defense, which is atrocious. Also, Pablo Sandoval doesn't look washed up in San Francisco. I mean, I guess maybe they know how to sort of
how to feed
get him to work. Yeah, in a sense, yes. Of watching Hunter Pence in person again after all those years being removed from the Astros. AT&T Park is one of the most gorgeous in all the world, and love the home plate entrance. Giants fans are very passionate and devoted. 39,000 in attendance, despite being this being a game between two last place teams. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening this week. I want you guys to visit our website, twoNatesOnSports.com. Also like us on Facebook at Two Nates on Sports. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. Also, we're always trying to improve, so leave us a comment and send us any questions. You can reach us via email at tunatesonsports@gmail.com. We'll have Nathan back on next week. Thank you, Evan, for stopping by.